So I just got back from a relaxing week exploring California's Central Coast. Now I have the fun task of editing my selects from the trip. Now, in terms of the gear that I brought, this one's significantly different than what I normally pack. This time, I went with a single camera, the Fujifilm X106 that was loaned to me, and my iPad Pro. But here's the thing. Even though these are the only two primary pieces of gear that I brought, I still wanted to maintain all of the important aspects of my photography workflow while traveling, specifically ensuring multiple copies of my images and getting them imported into Lightroom for culling and basic editing. Also, after using the Fujifilm X106 for the past week, I've got to say that I am very impressed. But I've got some thoughts about the camera and the entire Fujifilm line for that matter, which I'll share in an upcoming video, so be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out. But for this video, I'm going to show you the gear that I packed and how I managed my photos while on the go using my iPad Pro and Lightroom Mobile. It's also worth noting that you can use this exact same workflow with an iPhone that has a USB-C port for even greater flexibility. By the end, I think you'll agree that you really don't need a lot of gear to maintain a powerful and secure photography workflow. So let's dive in. Now, in terms of the gear, I'm going to break it down into two categories: camera gear and tech gear. So for the camera gear, I brought my camera, which is the Fujifilm X106 that was loaned to me. And I also put in a 512 gigabyte SanDisk SD card, which had plenty of space for the entire trip. I also brought two third-party batteries just to have extra power, and this filter adapter ring, which unfortunately you need and is not included with the X106 if you want to use any sort of filters. Speaking of filters, I brought my set of Maven magnetic filters, but I specifically used the linear polarizer and the 10-stop ND CPL combo filter pretty much the entire trip. Now, in terms of tech, I brought my 12.9-inch iPad Pro. This is the M4 model with the keyboard case. And to store backups of my images, I have my 4 terabyte SanDisk SSD drive. And connecting all of those devices is my Cable Matters hub. Now, there are a ton of hubs on the market that you can use, but I prefer the Cable Matters one because it has a bunch of ports and the SD card slot supports UHS 2 SD cards, which gives me faster read and write speeds. All right, now let's move on to the iPad Pro, and I'm going to walk you through the two primary workflows that I have. The first is the backup workflow, and the second is getting the photos imported into Lightroom Mobile. So in terms of my backup workflow, I like to have at least 3 copies. The first copy is always on the SD card. Those are the original photos, and I never delete that until I am like back home and am sure that everything is good to go. The second copy is done at the end of every day, pretty much in the evening when I'm back at the hotel. I will copy the photos from the SD card to the external SSD drive. And then the third one is when I import the photos into Lightroom. Now, pretty much wherever I go lately, I've got Wi-Fi. And thankfully, for the most part, it's pretty fast Wi-Fi. And so if I do have the Wi-Fi, then not only will I import the photos into Lightroom Mobile, but I will also turn on syncing so that those photos get copied to the cloud. And that is my third backup. And then technically, at home, if Lightroom is launched, which it is, I usually have my laptop connected because I only brought my iPad, and I had Lightroom loaded. So as I'm uploading the photos in Lightroom Mobile, Lightroom Desktop at home is pulling them down, and then I also have the option enabled to store a local copy of all originals. So you can kind of call it a fourth backup of the original files, which is it's just a nice little bonus. But with that, like I said, let's move on to the iPad Pro, and I'll walk you through the backup process and then the import process. All right, so let's start by showing you how I back up my photos from the SD card to the external SSD. Now, to the iPad Pro right now, I've got my Cable Matters hub connected. And to that, I've got 3 things connected. The first is power. So I want to make sure that the hub is powered because I'm connecting multiple devices to it. The second thing is the SD card that is inserted in the slot. And the third is I've got a USB-C cable connecting to the SanDisk external SSD drive. So with the hub, all 3 of those things are connected to the iPad Pro. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch Files. This app is included with every iPhone and iPad, but if you don't have it, you can go to the App Store and download it. It's from Apple and it's free. You can see that I have Skynet Mobile. That is my external SSD drive, and then untitled is the SD card from the Fujifilm camera. So the first thing that I'll do is go to Skynet Mobile here, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'll just call this, California trip. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm just calling it the name of the trip. And in here, I'm going to create another folder and I'll call this 2025 0704. All right, so now I have this folder here for July 4th. Now I'm going to go to the SD card. I'll go to DCIM and then this folder that the camera creates. And so I want to show you a few things here. I shoot RAW plus JPEG on the Fujifilm camera, and there's a very specific reason for it because Fujifilm cameras are known for their film simulations and their film recipes. I mean, they have like a cult following. That's kind of going to be what my next video is about with this camera. But those film simulations and recipes are stored to the JPEG. Obviously, you can't write to a RAW file itself. So if you want to use film simulations, but you also want the benefit of full RAW editing, then you'll set your camera to shoot RAW plus JPEG. And then you'll see here in the Files app that each photo has a JPEG and a RAW file. Fujifilm's RAW file format is RAF. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on date so we can sort by the date. And you can see here, I created that July 4th folder. So what I'm going to do is tap on select, and then I'm just going to drag down and select everything for July 4th. Now, you can do a few different things. You can just copy everything from the card to the local SSD drive, but I like to break it down by date. And so you can see here, I have everything from the 4th selected. Now I'm going to tap on share and I'm going to tap on copy. And so now I've copied those files to the clipboard. I'm going to go to Skynet Mobile, California trip. And then here you can imagine I would have a folder for each day. So again, I copied the images from July 4th. So I'm going to tap here, then I'm going to tap and hold, let go, and I'm going to select paste. And now you'll see that the files from the SD card are going to copy over to the SSD drive. Now, of course, there are a bunch of variables that go into how long this will take. Obviously, how fast your iPad is, what kind of hub you're using, the kind of card you're using, and of course, the number of files and the size of those files that you're copying from the SD card to the SSD drive. All of these variables will kind of affect how long it takes to copy from one media source to the other. All right, so you can see that we just finished here. And now on my SSD drive, I have my first copy. So technically this is the second generation of the images. The first generation is on the SD card, which I will not touch until I am back home. And again, just to show you really quickly, like I'll go ahead, I'll create another folder here. I'm going to call this 2025 0706, which is today. I'll go back to the SD card, DCIM, the folder that Fujifilm creates. And then you'll see I have photos that I took today. I did this because I'm going to illustrate how to import into Lightroom. And so you can see all I need to do is select these, then go to share, select copy, go to Skynet Mobile, California trip, the folder that I created. And that's also kind of an important thing. As you see here, I create the folder on the external SSD drive first. That way it's just easy. I know that that's where the photos need to go. I don't need to kind of fuss around. It's usually the first thing I do is I'll create the folder for that day's backups. And then I'll go to July 6th, tap and hold, and then let go and select paste. And there you go. And so now I have at the very least the first generation of those photos on the SD card. As long as it doesn't get lost or stolen, I'm good. But if it does, then I have my backup on the SSD drive, which is why it's really important to do your backups at least nightly. I think anything more than that's a bit excessive. If you've got the SSD drive with you and you take a break during the day, you can certainly do your incremental backup midday. But for me, I found that for the most part, if I leave the SSD drive at my hotel, then that's okay. And then I have my camera with the SD card on me. And again, because I have a 512 gigabyte SD card, I mean, I knew I would not run out of space for that entire trip. All right, now let me show you how I import the photos into Lightroom Mobile. So the first thing I'm gonna do is tap on Lightroom to launch the app. Now, similar to the file backup, the first thing that I do is create the album that I want to import the photos into. So to do that, I'm going to tap on the plus icon here and select album. Then I'm going to type in 2025 07 06, and these were in my backyard. So pretend that this was in California. I'll go ahead and tap on OK. There is my album. And now on the bottom right, you see that little blue pill and it's got two icons. I'm going to tap on the left one here with the plus icon, And then I'm going to tap on connected camera/card. Remember, my SD card is still connected to the iPad through my hub. So I'm going to tap on it here. Now, this is important, especially for Fujifilm users or people who generally shoot RAW plus JPEG on the same media card. So what I mean by that is with my Sony camera, my A1 Mark II, it has two slots. And so on one card, I have my RAW files saved, and then on the other one, I have my JPEGs saved. And so whenever I import, I only take the card with my RAW file, so this isn't an issue. However, if you have a camera with one slot, as is the case with the Fujifilm X106, or you decide to shoot RAW plus JPEG, but save them to the same media slot, this is going to be very important. So for me, I only want the RAW files on Lightroom. And that's just because Lightroom is where I edit my photos, and the JPEGs already have film simulations or film recipes applied, and that's not for me. And again, I've got a video that's going to be coming out soon, which explains all of that. So fortunately, you can just filter by only RAW or only JPEG. If you tap on the try dot on the top right over here in the blue bar, you can see we have photos and RAWs. Photos are JPEGs and other file formats. RAWs are RAWs. So I'm going to deselect photos. And then when I tap here, you can see I have these 4 RAW files that I took earlier today. Also, what I want to show you is notice how these other images down here, they're kind of grayed out and they have an LR badge on the top left. That means that these photos have already been imported into my Lightroom library. You can see that there are 2 RAW files here that are still unshaded. And that's because those are actually bad files. I think I missed focus or something, so I didn't import them into Lightroom. So I'm not going to import them again. However, you can also see that I have the 4 images from today, July 6th. So all I need to do is tap on the checkbox next to the date, and Lightroom will automatically select those 4 RAW files. Now with that, all I need to do is tap on import. Lightroom copies them to my library here, and then I'm going to tap on OK. And then I'm going to tap on the X on the top left over here. Now you can see I have my 4 images. If I tap on the cloud icon, you can see Lightroom will automatically start uploading to the cloud. Of course, you need a valid internet connection for that to work. If you don't, you can just tap on pause syncing and still work on the files because they are still stored on the iPad Pro, which does bring me to a very important point. I made sure that I had enough storage on my iPad every night before I imported the photos because you need enough storage on your iPad Pro because it gets stored locally and then it gets copied to the cloud. Once it's copied to the cloud, you can choose to clear your local cache if you want. And so that frees up storage space. But if you are importing, then you'll want to make sure that at the very least, whatever the file size is that you're importing into Lightroom Mobile, that you have that amount of storage on your iPad Pro. Now, back on the iPad Pro, if I tap on the cloud icon, you can see that we are synced and backed up. All right, so that is my travel workflow. And one of the main reasons, no joke, why I went on this trip with just this camera, the X100 Mark VI, and the iPad Pro is because I've heard from a lot of people who do similar or they're interested in doing similar, where they want to travel very light. One camera, fixed lens, and an iPad, or maybe even just an iPhone. And so I wanted to challenge myself to see, all right, how exactly would I make this work? I've done it before, but it's been a while. And so as you can see, I'm able to do everything that I need to do in terms of ensuring that I have copies of my photos and that everything is imported into Lightroom and synced to the cloud. Again, when it's in Lightroom, I can start my culling process. I can start deleting the photos that I don't need, and I can start doing basic edits to the photos that I'm really excited about. So with that, I always say this, Lightroom Mobile is just one small component of the entire Lightroom Cloud ecosystem. If you want to learn everything there is to know about this cloud ecosystem, then please do check out my course called Lightroom Everywhere. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Now, speaking of workflows, I also have this video here where I walk through my extensive bird culling workflow, so check that out. Of course, if you found this video helpful, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.